following is a Orion Sportscast production. Here are your hosts, Josh Egan, Brandon Waterhouse, and Jarrett Moore.
And welcome to the debut episode of Orion and One, a strictly basketball show. And to open the show, we got to bring up probably one of the biggest news items of the day is that Brandon had chicken strips from Dairy Queen. So, Brandon, how was that experience?
Moving on into other news, we have a free agency signing out of Stony Creek, Hamilton, Ontario. Jarek, you want to take it with the rest away?
Are we talking about the biggest free agent signing of the day? Are we talking about the Josh Egan free agent signing?
Sunday, August 1st.
They announced the big news of Josh is no longer single, ladies and gentlemen. He's taken for life.
The host of Orion is married.
Yeah, signed the papers yesterday. It was really anticlimactic. We got like the wedding party.
I pop champagne. I don't know about you, but I pop champagne.
I did too.
Nice fucking chicken fingers.
You know, we went to we went to dinner with I went to dinner with Maddie, my parents, and Maddie's parents, and we went to this place called Innsville, and I'm glad I didn't pay for the bill.
Jesus,
Let's just say that.
You're calling out Binsville? Is this what it's called?
Innsville. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk some money. So before free agency started, just to give the teams kind of an outline of what they were, able to spend, the NBA set the salary cap for the 2021-2022 season for $112,414,000. That is the cap, and then you have up to $136,606,000 tax line. So that kind of gave the teams what they were able to spend. And it wasn't the first deal to be signed into free agency, but it's one that hits close to home, and that's Kyle Lowry joining the Heat. He signed a 3-year deal with the Raptors, and then it was a trade to the Heat. It was $30 million a year over 3 years for a total of $90 million, and the Heat sent back Goran Dragic, I'm going to botch these names, Precious Achiuwa, and a future second-round pick. So, but also good for the Heat is despite the signing of Lowry and Robinson, which we'll get to later, the Heat can still use their $9.5 million in the mid-level exception and still stay below the cap.
Heat just used some of that money to bring over PJ Tucker from the Milwaukee Bucks, the reigning champion.
All right,
I like that signing.
So there's that. So Brandon, what can we take away from this Kyle Lowry trade? Because I know you're our basketball insider.
I guess the rumors were that Goran Dragic and Precious Achiuwa and other draft assets were going to be on the way back to Toronto, and I'm sure that is the case. However, I don't know if those have been officially confirmed. I don't know where you had got that from, if that was after
just from
the news. Okay, so that I guess I haven't seen that. So I've seen that Kyle was traded. So it always, I guess the lesser stuff gets released always after the big shock. So obviously you're worried about Kyle Lowry first, and then it's exciting to see what the Raptors come back. So Precious Achiuwa, he's a center, he's a forward, maybe a power forward. He's a center, he's young. His last year was his rookie year, obviously, his previous year. So he's a sophomore, similar to Malachi Flynn. However, he fits right underneath that situation with Scotty Barnes. You could be great behind him, and those two could learn together. However, they obviously need to we're looking for a star center. I still think we obviously need a big man solidified in the first center. Chris Boucher isn't necessarily going to cut it right now. However, there were some rumors about shopping Aaron Baines. I definitely don't want to re-sign him. I'm really curious to see what we can get back, and we can still obviously throw away some of these trades. I'm exposed to you guys, however, that I don't really want to see Dragic even don a Raptors jersey. Like, that's just how quick I want him to be in and out of the system. So hopefully him and his contract or a little bit of his salary can be moved right away, because I don't think Raptors fans like him, nor do I think his style of play is going to fit in with our core. Like Precious Achiuwa, you can always mold a young, energetic rookie, and a veteran such as Goran Dragic is probably stubborn in his ways right now, especially coming from Miami. And Josh, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Oh, you're frozen on my screen. You guys, can you hear me in good motion right now? Sorry. So Precious Achiuwa, Goran Dragic, obviously potentially being a little bit stubborn, older, not necessarily ready to adapt to the Raptors style of play. However, I'm just making that assumption. It's exciting to get back. Obviously, we're still looking where I don't know what we could move that the Gorgon with another couple of our assets. However, Leaving us with that 30 million or whatever around of cap space that Kyle Lowry was going to require is obviously the biggest takeaway for the Raptors standpoint. In terms of looking at it the other way, where we'll go after the Raptors is that the Miami Heat are clearly looking up for a 2 to 3 year window here to recompete for a championship, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm not the biggest basketball guy, but one of the things I take away from this is that the Raptors have now lost Kyle Lowry, which is essentially their, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, like, he's up there. And, we've had this discussion on the show before in the previous variation of the show where Kyle Lowry is probably the greatest Raptor of all time. Like, he might not have been the most talented player of all time, but he is the greatest Raptor of all time for what he's done for the team, and not just the team, like the city of Toronto too. And this is a massive loss for the Raptors and Raptors fans. I mean, Jarek, I'm sure you know, like, the impact he brought to the team. So what does this mean to you, like the Raptors losing Kyle Lowry?
I think it really sucks, obviously, just because he's meant so much to the team, like you said. It's almost like an end of an era. Obviously, like last year, it was kind of the ending of the success the Raptors have had over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But it really truly feels like it's an end of an era, just kind of like watching him leave. But like back to Dragic, I feel like the important thing is he's actually worth something. So yeah. We didn't just get nothing back or just like a salary dump. He's worth something. So even if it's a couple of second round draft picks. Masai Ujiri has obviously shown that he can use his second round draft picks well over the last few years with Norman Powell for one example. But I feel like I said, he's worth something. And I feel like that's the most important part of the trade. But like I said, like it's great that we got something back for something and we can get something back for it. I know I use something a lot, but still.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most, like, I don't know how often you see this in the NBA, Brandon. Maybe I'll be able to shine a little bit of light on this, but a sign and trade, I know they happen more in the NBA than they do in most sports, but to get a guy on a 3-year deal or lose a guy going to another team on a 3-year deal and then actually get value back for him. Like, Kyle could have just signed with the Heat, right? Like, it didn't have to be a sign and trade, but they were able to do that, which is
it's
pretty
unique.
good
Yeah,
for the Raptors.
It's a good point you bring up. Like, I mean, as a competitor and as a fellow sports management enthusiast, you're like, well, why as the Heat general manager and why as Pat Riley should I have to require to even give up anything for this player if he's a UFA or something like that? And I think the whole sign and trade thing still kind of confuses me in terms of
the only thing I can think of it is that they had to create cap space to bring in Lowry and these other guys. So the sign and trade was the only possible option because you can't trade somebody for nothing. Right. So
would I be wild to think that Kyle Lowry was part of the reason what they did a sign and trade, or am I just thinking outside the box?
It might have been that. He might have said, I'll go join the Heat, but I want my team, the city of Toronto has been my home for the last 9 years. I want them to get something.
Yeah, you know what? That brings a good direction into it as well. I'd say that I couldn't go off the top of my head and tell you the most, recent sign and trade situations in the NBA, and obviously the tenure that they had before. But you bring a good point. Obviously, if the return was gutty or selfish rather for Kyle Lowry, maybe it wouldn't be something that he would want on a stain of his resume in Toronto.
Yeah.
However, obviously making it clear to both parties that he wants a return going for him, and obviously there could be something that carries the fact that what would it be? Would it be different for a sign and trade if it was a $15 million player, like 2 years from now, Kyle Lowry? But it's $30 million in space, so it's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Kyle Lowry all day, I'm sure, but the Raptors did make another signing today. Gary Trent Jr., 3-year deal with $54 million to return to the Raptors, and the deal also has a 3rd-year player option. Gary Trent Jr., he was kind of finding his stride with the Raptors near the end of the season. He hit that sick game-winning 3 with like 2 seconds left, which that was awesome. That was hype. Brandon, what can we expect from this player over the next 3 years?
Yeah, it was a very positive signing to see after we saw Kyle Lowry leave the Raptors today. That the next question hanging in the balance of the Raptors was that we could get Gary Trent to return. And I think the best part is that he was open to potentially taking less from the Toronto Raptors and coming back to the situation where he felt confident in, then going up into the open market, which is, I think, a huge pat on the back to the Raptors organization and what they have going, because clearly, obviously, drafting fourth with a lottery pick and losing one of your oldest players with the most history and leadership on your team, you'd think that they're going lower, but I'd be very surprised that they come out in top 6 in the East next season with a very competitive push to the end of the season. We've still yet to sign someone with a lot of the money we have, and I still believe that our rookies can have more of an immediate impact than most in the league. Especially because the first overall pick and the second overall pick may be good, but those teams are going to be bottom tier regardless. The Houston Rockets and the Detroit Pistons is going to be no help for them. The Cavaliers are going to be hopeless, but you can see Scottie Barnes make a direct impact, and I think that was also, we can go back to the draft. One of the reasons why the Raptors picked him is because I think he just fits right away. Almost, you seem like it's almost like him and the Raptors organization were destined to each other, because they had a lot of chemistry leading up towards them being drafted, and I think it goes beyond the court, which is good, because obviously you want to build a team that will sacrifice for you in all aspects. So I think there was a little bit of a deeper connection somehow. But Scottie Barnes checks all the check marks for the Raptors, and I think can make more of an immediate impact. But getting back to your point on Gary Trent Jr., I think that he's going to be a great fundamental core piece that hopefully can reach an extension or a deal, obviously, after this little 3 to 4 opt-outs contract that was just signed. 18 is a great price to get him at if he continues and even just steadily improves his pace from where we picked him up. Obviously, what we left with him in return from Norman Powell, it feels great as a Raptor fan to get this commitment from him, because it would have been a little bit more hurtful if we lost Norman and then didn't get any commitment from the player we got in return, who was obviously he's 22 years old. He has a lot of upside, and I think that was the reason we were all excited to get him back. And I personally love Gary Trent. You're right. He brings that it factor. He brings that confidence, similar to a more aged veteran, Jalen Suggs, if you will. And I think if we were to bring in Jalen Suggs early on, I think more of an issue is that we might have drafted the more talented player available, however, more confusing and situational and problematic fit for the lineup. And I think that we would have to give some guys, it would be a very poor development for Suggs, which would be bad on our reputation if we couldn't fit him in as the 4th overall pick. But some of our best players, and I just shared a tweet about Malachi Flynn, like he's about to be that guy. He was our first round late pick last year, and he can handle the ball, and he looks confident right now, and we developed very well. And Precious Achiuwa is always going to be an option behind Scottie Barnes, which we're going to develop perfectly, and we already have Boucher, Pascal in the system. So I believe that back to Gary Trent's point, he obviously wanted to stick around in something that he felt he could get the most touches. And I think that a lot of the offense will be revolved around, he'll be the number 2, but probably behind, obviously now Kyle's gone. Fred VanVleet will have the number 1 option. And Gary Trent's a great second shooting guard there for us. And I think that it's gonna be a great roster. We need to sign that center. I'm really gonna get to that point until we sign that number 1 center.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we could chat Raptors all day, and I'm sure we'll talk about them more as the offseason develops. I mean, another big signing the Raptors still need to make is Masai. Like, he's still not under contract for next season, so we'll see what happens there. But let's get to another signing, and this was with the Chicago Bulls and Lonzo Ball. The Bulls are sending Thomas. Oh my God, these names are so long. Thomas Satoransky and Garrett Temple, and a second-round pick to New Orleans for Lonzo Ball, who then signed a 4-year, $85 million contract. Lonzo Ball is one of the most fascinating characters or players in the NBA, just because of his whole family. Like, his dad I think his dad ran him out of LA. So we'll see what happened there. His dad kind of hasn't really been in the scene since then. Obviously, he's got 2 other brothers in the NBA as well. So this signing was for a lot of money, and I don't know, has he earned that money? What do you guys think?
I'll go first. It's on my mind right now. There's a couple of those signings this free agency where you're like those players, and there's a really funny one that I'm sure you guys saw as well. We'll bring up after this, where it's like even in relation to Gary Trent, we signed them for what they could be worth at the end of next season, obviously at the end of their contract for sure. But right now it's very much of an eyebrow raiser, and I wanted to stray away from the last one because the biggest eyebrow raiser of today's free agency was Duncan Robinson signing for 5 years, like $90 million, a player that can barely play defense on the Obviously, it's a great shooter. The biggest contract for an undrafted player. I think a lot of people are comparing him around the world or around the league rather, to people with similar contracts and skill levels and age. And I think that it was a huge scam on the Miami Heat or on Duncan Robinson's part. Obviously, I don't think that he's worth that in all. He was a great role player. I don't think that he was as much of an expensive starter as you positioned him. You're going to have to get rid of Tyler Hero coming down on the stretch, because those two are too similar, and they're going to be asking for some, that sets a precedent. We learned that precedent. So it's only going to get worse for the Miami Heat if they think that they have to pay that much for those type of players. Especially when you just get a dog. Kyle Lowry can shoot, but obviously they're paying to protect the spacing on the floor, which is important for them. And sorry, we were talking about what was this signing? Lonzo Ball, and I think that it's important to note that he's going to Chicago to create a little bit of a duo with Zach LaVine, who's also looking to get paid. And
what about Kobe White?
Who they have to bring up some space, and you bring up Kobe White as well. There's a lot of pieces and young pieces in Chicago, and they have a lot of promise, and they keep on adding too. They just got Nikola Vucevic at the deadline last year, who was an all-star center and showed out right away. And obviously, the New Orleans Pelicans are a huge loss between Lonzo and Zion chemistry-wise. But I think this is a situation where it's always a precedent, right? I guess I'm trying to use Jeff Skinner as an example. You sign him and then he shoots, he's not worth something again. Like, I keep on going back to him being $9 million and scoring no goals and like that. Like, Lonzo obviously could very well be a glimpse worthy of this contract, but you could imagine to have a bad year to be what you signed for, you just be traded out, you get bought out. We've seen it before. However, Lonzo seems to be driven to improve, and outside of the Ball family, you're right. I think the most attraction around the father has been lessened the further he got away from LA.
You want to hear some breaking news?
Let's hear it.
Free agent guard Norman Powell has agreed to a 5-year, $90 million deal to return to the Portland Trail Blazers. Jarek, what are your thoughts on Norman Powell going to the Trail Blazers?
Well, first off, as a Raptors fan, good for him. Like, I always like seeing our former players get paid. Exactly.
Oh, second of all, that is the exact same contract Duncan Robinson signed. Take it in.
That is.
I was just gonna say that. So if a player like Duncan Robinson's worth $90 million, like, what's Tyler Hero worth? What's whether all these other guys are kind of maybe not the same players, but like players that are kind of around the same type of player, like guys who can hit threes, guys who can like hit the mid range. Like, I don't know. It's
Norman
like
Powell is so versatile, and he can play defense very well, which it concludes the contract.
True, that's true. But yeah, like I said, good for him. That's really the best thing I can add to it is good for him. It helps guys like Dame. Like, obviously he needed players like Norman to come in there and help him out. Obviously, when Dame has an off night and needs to like pass the ball around, Norman Powell is the kind of guy that can hit shots. So yeah, it's a good signing for Portland. Obviously, I feel like they need to do a lot more than Norman Powell if they want to compete in the West. But yeah, it's a good signing for him and a good signing for Portland.
Yeah, just of note, we're recording this like during the peak of free agency, so we're gonna have breaking news throughout it. We do have a list of previous signings, so we're kind of be jumping back and forth. Another deal that was signed, and this one was kind of massive. The Phoenix Suns have signed Chris Paul to a 4-year deal worth $120 million, and that deal will run out when he's 40. Of note, this deal, when it's done, Chris Paul will be the number one earner in the NBA history with $446 million made from NBA contracts. And somehow the Suns still have $26 million in cap space, enough to sign another name and use the $9.5 million in the middle of exemption and still stay below the tax line, which is actually unreal for them. So they have some potential to add some more players. What do we figure Chris Paul, re-upping with the Suns? Are they going to try and run it back? Because they got really close. I think they should. Close. I think they should too. Like, Chris Paul was unreal. I think he's earned this money. He obviously, I'm kind of getting, and I don't know if this comparison is fair, but I'm kind of getting Vince Carter vibes from this guy, where he just kind of wants to keep playing and keep going. He's chasing a ring, and I think his best bet is to kind of do it with the team that he just did it with. Like, it proved to work. They've got some solid the foundation there to keep going at it. They have more cap space to add players. Am I off base here, or what do you guys think about that?
I think I totally agree. It's one of those things where I don't think there's another team that he could have went to he's gonna have the chance to win a championship like he's gonna have in Phoenix. Brandon, what do you think?
I agree, especially coming off such a
it's the money too, right? Like he could go to say
season. Obviously the money too that they have available. Obviously it's a lot to take on for another team for Chris Paul, especially to like you're gonna take that contract on and then you're gonna have to reform your whole team and fan base around Chris Paul, and it's not gonna go great because it might not be that exact same feature. I think that the chemistry he brings, especially to Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton and that trio rather, is a little bit more special than probably around the league that he would get value from. But Chris Paul and what he did with the Suns was remarkable. They weren't even really projected to be close to the top 5 in the West, let alone make it as far as they did. Even the playoffs, some of them had them out before the season started. So I think these days, if the money's available in the right place and it's the most that can be paid out to you, I think you bring up Vince Carter rather, in his ring chasing throughout an old age. I would argue, it's very similar story wise, but impact wise on the floor, Chris Paul has been very consistent and still puts up historic numbers to the date on the floor with the ball. And I think at the end of his career, even the last 4 years, Vince Carter was struggling to come off the bench and hit a couple deep shots, and it was looking like he couldn't retire too soon. So I think obviously Vince Carter wasn't signing this type of contract with the money as Chris Paul just did.
Yeah, just some more breaking news. Blake Griffin is re-upped in Brooklyn for 1 year, so he's going to try and run it back with those guys. They're going to be going head-to-head with LA in the NBA Finals next year, I think. So we'll see what happens there. There's no more breaking news at the moment, so let's move on to the next signing in Mike Conley. 3 years, $72.5 million to stay in Utah. What do we make of this signing? Good signing, bad signing? What impact does this have on the Utah Jazz?
I think you keep saying it, but it's the run it back factor. I think there's a lot of teams right now.
A lot of teams want to run it back this year.
And I think a lot of teams have the ability to run it back. So it's like, I think last year you kind of see how much parity there is in the NBA now, which is always a good thing. I always like when there's a new chance at having a new champion every year. Mm-hmm. But like you said, it's the run it back factor. I think there's a lot of teams out there who have the chance to have a chance to run it back. So I think why not? Really, like I think that's a great signing for Utah. Utah was really impressed last year. I don't want to say it was out of nowhere because we've always known they've had the potential to be a good team. But like you said, it's the run it back factor. Let's get going here. I like it. Let's go.
Lots of Jazz in Utah.
That's a good pick.
I love the Jazz. I'm not gonna lie. I've always been a Spider fan. So I think any players that they can bring into Utah to help him win a championship, I'm down for. If it's not the Raptors, let it be Utah.
We got that Dairy Queen heartburn. However, I laugh. What team are we talking about?
The Jazz.
Utah Jazz, baby.
Yeah, the Utah Jazz. They have a lot to prove again. They kind of year in year out. 2 years ago, obviously, they got ousted when Jamal Murray went on fire in like 4-0 sweep. Like it was a crazy back and forth 7-game series against Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray in the bubble. That highlighted one of Jamal Murray's most,
Canadian.
Crazy. The next year, the Jazz went on to that historic regular season run. We just saw them in the top position throughout the whole Western season. They went on like 20-game win streaks almost twice. It was insane to watch. They had, one of the 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert, Spider, obviously Donovan Mitchell, as mentioned, who keeps to progress as a main guy, as the NBA top 10 point guards there is to date currently. And I think an important factor to note with a team like that is the core pieces that have been around necessarily on the team, but as a veteran in the league, this is embarrassing, Dairy Queen. That to keep around a guy like Mike Conley is important for the fan base and the culture because he's someone that's steady off the bench. He can play. He doesn't care about personal accomplishments. I guess what I'm trying to say is he'd put the team first, and I think that he was going to get paid regardless of where he went.
It's like the Lowry factor in a way. Like he knows who his stars are, so he's going to give the ball to them and let them play their game and sit there and be ready for when he's needed.
Yeah, for sure. I liked this signing. I thought it was decent. Nothing too outstanding, but it's one of those signings that it's going to happen. And $72.5 million for this guy is pretty good. Just moving on to the next one, Jarrett Allen, 5-year deal, $100 million contract to stay with the Cavaliers. I didn't think this was too impactful. I thought the price was kind of high. Am I wrong in saying that?
He's not off. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he's not an offensive center, is he? He'd be more of your defense and rebounds kind of guy. So I don't know. I feel like it's kind of high, but at the same time, guys like Jarrett Allen, I don't think are around the league a lot. So I feel like it's one of those guys, like they knew who they had, so they just kind of kept him because they wanted him.
Jarrett Allen would have been a big pickup for any other team. And I was actually very hopeful rather that the Raptors would take a chance at him because he's a mobile big man. He plays a lot. One of his dominant factors is that he's a big block. He comes into 3 to 4 blocks a game. His presence within the paint is very, very much reminiscent of old school basketball. If you ever remember Rasheed Wallace as a Detroit Piston, that's one of his comparisons as a young player. And I think Jarrett Allen re-signing in Cleveland was actually a disappointment to me because there wasn't obviously much promise in there. So he felt as if though he was securing his own bag. That's only however I can see that one because he's not looking to win in Cleveland.
Do you think in a way that we do kind of already have our own Jarrett Allen and Chris Boucher, or is there really no comparison to those two?
You know what the crazy thing is? Chris Boucher is like 29. And a lot of people mistake him for being 24, 25 and being a young core piece of the Toronto Raptors, but I'm really concerned about his age. And the fact that he's almost like coming through now and we're just realizing that he's more than a player off the bench. And I think we're just coming to the realization here that he could be an NBA starter next season. But that's why I keep pushing for us to get a Kristaps Porzingis, and I was hoping for even a Nerlens Noel, but he just recently re-signed in New York with the Knicks, which is unfortunate for free agencies. But for Chris Boucher, it's not something that he's ready to take on right away. And we keep on saying that. Even this next year coming on, I think that I'm still waiting for another signing here to bring in a starter center because Aaron Baines is supposed to take over that 50-50 role with Chris Boucher. And I think we'll get exposed because Chris Boucher, although can extend the floor and he can space it with his shot because he can shoot a nice release from the three. I wonder what his selection is right there in terms of stats from 3. I think it's above 30%, especially for a long, lanky man like he is. And he's fast, but the only thing about him is that he's not very heavy and he can get bumbled around in the paint. And I always remember us losing games almost in the last minutes because the plays would be run through our post and our center and they'd score on Boucher. So I'm really hoping that we get someone with a little bit more of a base and, someone like Jarrett Allen, obviously. So I think that I'm going to be curious to see what Masai does, and obviously Josh brings up a good point, but I think that a lot of signs are leaning towards us re-signing Masai as well.
Do you think there's another guy that the Raptors could sign, like a Marc Gasol?
There is, yeah, but in terms of that exact reference, I don't believe Marc Gasol would be great for this team right now.
Yeah, he's a little older.
I'm really thinking that they're leaning towards any players 26 and under in terms of signing them now. If you see a player signed over in the next coming weeks, 26 and over, that's a big push. And I hope it to be a worthy player. I think that Kristaps is 26, is right on that cuff, but it'll be interesting to see what type of pieces that we'd have to move for a player like that. So, I'm more concerned about that position the most, obviously, as you can tell right now. We're good everywhere else.
Yeah. Tim Hardaway Jr., he was a free agent, obviously, but now he's agreed to a 4-year, $74 million deal to return to the Dallas Mavericks. This seems to be a theme with these teams running it back. The Mavericks were pretty good this year. They're kind of bringing back a couple guys. What do we think of this signing? Because I thought it was a decent signing for them, bringing back a solid player. I think he was ranked number 6 on the free agency list, and he just goes back to the team that he was just on. So do we like this? Do we hate it? Spend too much, too little? Could he have made more? What do we think?
I think it's a team that's improving, that kept a player that's helping them improve. So I think this only works well for Dallas because they're just going to continue to get better and to continue to become a better contender that they are. And I think any player that's going to help Luka get better is good for that Dallas franchise.
That's a very good idea. And I think that it's another one of those players that looks very attractive outside of his team. And Hardaway Jr. is one of those players that could help a lot of teams make a great push next season right away. And he's a player that is very complimentary to Luka's play. And I think it's worth any penny he got. And I'm still waiting for Mark Cuban to make a little bit more of a move. It's going to be unfortunate if Luka has to go through another season without that type of help that he deserves.
Did you guys see that? Just speaking of Mark Cuban, this was a nice little crossover. Did you see that clip I sent you guys the other day of Mark Cuban on Monday Night Raw? I forgot that totally happened. That guy's everywhere. He does so much for, just for Dallas and the community, all that. So I like Mark Cuban. He's good. We got Reggie Bullock. He also signed with the Mavs. I don't know too much about this guy, to be honest. Brandon, do you know anything about him?
That's a different sign. So that's someone coming out of New York or something. I wonder where he came from. Or it was a re-signing. I forget where he finished his last.
I think you're correct when you say New York.
Yeah. But he's good. He's young. He's tall. He's long, and he has a good wingspan. And I think that it's not hopefully the last thing made by the Mavericks.
Oh, my bad.
Okay. And then we have David Nwaba, 3-year deal worth $15 million to stay with the Rockets. And the one thing I took away from this now is, don't the Rockets have way too many guards now? This seems to be like the 50th guard they've acquired in the last year. Like, they've got a lot of guards. Obviously, they're kind of in like a rebuilding mode here after losing Harden and a couple other guys. They're not quite sure what they're doing. They went on a hot streak for a little bit, then they went on a cold streak. But I look at their roster and I just see guard. So are they stockpiling guards to trade some of them, or like
they're gonna have to?
Yeah, they're gonna have to move some guys.
Yeah, and especially with the way they drafted Jalen Green and Josh Christopher as well, who are notorious duo. They played high school ball together and are very, very, very similar in terms of guard play and excitement. You don't want to let those go when you already just have two. It's a situation where you can only line it up. You're ruining a lot of players' developments, and not only players and management will get frustrated.
Yeah.
But families, camps, and agents will get frustrated as well because.
It's one of those deals where they're stockpiling assets, it looks like, to make a bigger move later on down the line. That's what I take away from it.
I think it also goes to show you that, like, how ready they weren't to trade James Harden, because it seems like that,
but
franchise...
they were forced into that. James Harden put on a fucking fat suit and like went out for warm up and just floated air balls, and then he shows up in Brooklyn 2 days later looking shredded like an Olympian. Like, that was weird, right? Like, it was odd.
James Harden is an anomaly.
Yeah,
But do you guys think that, like, just like the kind of the chaos that has surrounded the Houston Rockets, like, since that trade, or even probably months before that trade, kind of like it shows in the roster now?
It's definitely a trickle down. Yeah, it's they've got some work to do. So Jeff Green, he signs with the Nuggets for $10 million over 2 years. Denver did use part of their 9.5 mid-level exception here on Green, so now they are $2 million below the luxury tax with 14 players. So they do have a little bit of work to do. What can we expect from the Denver Nuggets next year, Brandon?
A similar season. So remember, they didn't even have a Jamal Murray for the playoffs at all. He was actually out at like the halfway point with a serious leg injury. So I think he tore his ACL. It was really brutal, and they didn't have Jamal Murray. Like, I'm hoping he gets healthier and he comes back and at least he's ready for 60% of the next season.
Is he expected to start the season?
I think he's still recovering. I don't know if he's expected to start yet. It was a really serious injury. I'm following him on his socials, but haven't seen him running around. He's just walking on the court right now, which is obviously a little bit concerning considering the season's a couple months around the corner, if not training camp weeks. But they also re-signed Will Barton, who's a veteran on the Nuggets, who brings consistency off the bench, and he's willing to play multiple positions and sacrifice minutes to guys like Michael Porter Jr. And I think the Nuggets are back on the pattern of run it back because you're going to sign a player, obviously like Will Barton, bring in the players that you're trying to add at that 9.5, whatever, like you said, range, 10, I guess, 2 for 10. And you're banking on the fact that one of the best top 10, again, point guards in the league comes back healthy and provides. Like, you have the MVP, you have Jokic, and you did all what you did last year, providing the power that you did, being a dominant team still after top 3 throughout the Western Conference without Murray, just because you had a Jokic. And I think it's very sad that we couldn't get to see a little bit more of our home Canadian Kitchener boy, because I'm looking for him to be back in Betty. Like you say, what to expect from the Nuggets, like that's what I expect. I expect something to be, I always expect something from Murray. Like, I don't think about the Nuggets. I don't even think about the MVP. It'll be exciting.
Yeah, you summed that up perfectly. You took the words right out of my mouth. One of the more interesting signings of the day, because there was a lot to this, was Bobby Portis. He was at the time reported looking for more than 9.5 million over two years, which was outside the exception window. So teams were struggling to make him fit. Most notably was the Miami Heat. He eventually re-signed with the Bucks on a 2-year, $9 million deal. The second year has a player option, so he could opt out. He decided to stick with the Bucks, based off, loyalty. He was great in their run to the finals and the eventual championship win, stability, and he's happy there. So he likes that. He sacrificed money to stay there, and he did not use his non-bird right. So the full 9.5 million that was applied to his contract is now not used for the middle exception, so they can use that 5.9 on another player and have it not count against the cap, which is massive for the Bucks. So, what do we think of this guy re-signing in Milwaukee?
Another complimentary piece. He's one of those guys that's willing to take as little as money as possible. Obviously, with the NBA making as much as you do, regardless with any. But he's a complimentary player that needs to be signed, and is a depth player that obviously, again, could be used anywhere else. He's got a ring on his finger. Any player, any team, rather, looking to make bits and pieces of additions to their rosters for a run, wants to look at anyone who has a previous ring on their finger, and Bobby Portis now can do that.
Yeah, for sure. I liked this signing. I thought it showed loyalty to a team. And I wish we could see that in hockey, right? Like, it'd be nice if teams took discounts because they wanted to stay somewhere. Especially
a team in Toronto.
Yeah, we're not going to – I mean, there's multiple hockey teams in Toronto, but there's one major one that we won't call out. Man, is that something? Yeah, the Steelheads. Dwight Howard returns to the Lakers on a 1-year deal. We didn't get a salary report on this, but I'm assuming it's for the minimum. The Lakers also made some other signings in Trevor Azara and Wayne Ellington Jr., and they also just made another one whose name I cannot find at the moment. But they're kind of – are the Lakers bringing in all these complimentary pieces? Are they making a run for it next year? I think they kind of have to.
They're bringing a lot of old players. Trevor Ariza, you mentioned they're bringing back Dwight Howard. There was, I think it was Wayne Ellington, even, that might have been his name.
Yeah, that was it.
Another player. And there's a picture I have right here. And Kent Bazemore.
Kent Bazemore, that's the one.
So all these players were playing with Kobe Bryant 8 to 10 years ago, with these old school Lakers jersey on, and they all went their own ways. They were veteran players back then. So these guys are gray hair players now, taking a lot of less money to run up behind, because you're losing. You just lost Alex Caruso, who's a young player that brings energy to the Lakers, and you're trying to replace him with a bunch of these old bums. You're relying on primary scoring, and when you have these guys, you're not looking for complementary scoring or depth scoring, because you're not going to get energy from a lot of these guys. They're running late on their career, and you're really hoping that Russell Westbrook has some type of resurgence in terms of shooting, because if not, I'm sure he can't run down up in the floor the whole season. And I'm giving a lot of discredit to Anthony Davis, but he has a lot to prove as well next year,
especially after last season, because I think Anthony Davis was. I don't want to blame them not winning a championship or getting past the first round on Anthony Davis, because obviously it was a team full of injuries and inconsistency. But I feel like you said, Anthony Davis has really the most to prove on that team. I'd say even more than Russell Westbrook, in my opinion.
And yeah,
I agree with that.
There.
Yeah. The next signing we have, well, it's not really a signing, but we've talked about a lot of teams here, and one major team we haven't talked about is the Boston Celtics. They haven't really done much, and that's because there was a report that came out saying they want to keep their cap sheet as clean as possible for the 2022 free agency. Now, I haven't looked into it. I probably should have, but who is a NBA free agent in 2022 that the Celtics could be going after?
Initially, it was Kawhi Leonard. If he had returned opted in, and Chris Paul, if they opted into their 1 years, because that would have taken them as a UFA after this coming up season. So those are the top two that they did. They still put on the top agencies list this past off season. However, going into next season, I think even guys like Devin Booker might have been available. Obviously, I mentioned the two, Chris Paul and Kawhi Leonard, sorry. And you're looking at, obviously, with the exception of extensions signed today, that Stephen Curry, Damian Lillard, we're also going into that next season as a UFA. So it's always a gamble. At the moment, Kevin Durant's even going into the next season as a UFA behind James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and John Wall. Actually, I think that players that lock that back up off of this list that I'm looking at was Jimmy Butler just signed, so he's off of this list. So they're losing that opportunity that they're trying to save this money for. So it's kind of sad. So we'll see. But there's some young players. Even Zion Williamson's name is showing up. So a guy like Zion Williamson with that type of Boston Celtics money could get offer sheeted. And you could make, what if it's Zion Williamson though, but remember Montreal and Sebastian Aho with an offer sheet, like it gets close.
I don't know, man. And I think with Zion too, I think this is a really big year for him in New Orleans.
Luka Doncic, RJ Barrett. It's actually a little bit bigger of a free agency than I'm thinking.
But those are all RFAs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's money available.
Right.
And,
you mentioned
signed.
You mentioned Kawhi Leonard. We might as well address it right now while it was brought up. He hasn't done anything yet, and we are 4 hours and 21 minutes into free agency. What do you think is going to happen with Kawhi?
It'll take 2 weeks like it always does.
Well, what's Uncle Dennis trying to get out of the clip show? Is he trying to get a bigger mansion? Is he trying to get a Maserati?
Probably.
They're trying to get his next season just paid for to rehab because he's coming off of ACL surgery.
So you think he doesn't play next season? Because that's what I think. I think he wants to be paid.
Yeah, there's a way that he doesn't play the regular season at all. Considering Paul George can take him into a top 6, top 5, top 4 position in the Western Conference. I think they still have complementary pieces with Serge Ibaka opting into his contract. Hopefully he's healthy as well, that they could still compete. But you don't want to leave a situation. Obviously, he likes to create the tension that he's doing something else that he just likes to do, because it's funny, we mentioned that he's not a drama queen, but we really have been seeking into the fact that he is a little bit more of an attention seeker. Just because he doesn't talk doesn't mean he's not a diva. It's some type of tweet I read today, so shout out to that person. And I think Kawhi Leonard is obviously with his camp, right? His uncle is his camp, his agent or whatever. That I think they're looking for comfortable rehab, trusted rehab, and quality, I guess. And obviously he's still signed to come home to LA, so that's where he's from. It's kind of ridiculous to think that he'll move off of that. And for an accepting team, imagine you're the GM, both of you, would you want such an expensive price tag on a player who honestly has a pretty bearing down knee going into the latter part of his career? His window is shortening up, and you already know that he doesn't like to admit his real feelings to you front up. He's making phone calls behind your back to Russell Westbrook and then going to Paul George and telling him that, Russell Westbrook called me. I think we should go behind Russell Westbrook's back, which is a whole other story. That's kind of funny. We could get into another day.
Westbrook's, he's joining the Lakers. The Lakers are making a run for it. So.
Could have happened. That could have always happened differently. And everyone's from LA. All the superstars born in LA. Russell Westbrook went to UCLA. But, back to your point about Kawhi, is that I think the most recent thing is that he's just looking for a good rehab, I guess, that he trusts why would you want to rehab somewhere else other than home? You could see he was coming to the games and he was in the stands, and he moved down to the bench with his family and his kids. He has young kids. It's a similar situation to a lot of hometown signings. He's just going to stick it back out. But obviously, the latest was like a 1-on-1, so nothing over 2 to 3 years. So hopefully he can still figure out something. And but regardless, it saves me from buying another Kawhi Leonard jersey.
I guess that's the most important thing. Just a couple other contracts of note here. Mo Harkless, 2 years, $9 million with the Kings. Sacramento has non-bird rights and can sign him, or had non-bird rights, and they could sign him up to 120% of his $3.6 million salary last season. And then, Sacramento with this deal, they were able to keep 9.5 in mid-level exception, which was huge for them. Will Barton returns to Denver on a 2-year, $32 million contract. Cameron Payne joins the Suns on a 3-year, $19 million contract. And that's just kind of some deals of note. We got a couple more to get to near there, but of the ones I just said, anybody got any insight onto those?
Good depth pieces if there's depth in basketball.
Yep. Yeah,
Always
I agree with
depth.
that. Right? Like, you obviously you have less players than other sports, but you still need the depth because,
Okay, so out of these names, tell me who you popped out for you. Try to remember 2 names off of the top of your head out of these, I think 15 names I'm going to give you that are remaining free agents on the board from today at 10:30 at night. Danny Green, Otto Porter Jr., Lou Williams, Pat Mills, Paul Millsap, Ryan Forbes, Rudy Gay, Tony Snell, James Ennis, Avery Bradley, Andre Iguodala, Mike Scott, JJ Redick, Wesley Matthews, Markieff Morris, Robin Lopez, Reggie Jackson, and Ben McLemore. Honestly, Reggie Jackson sticks out for me the most, the way he finished off the season with the Clippers down there. I'm hoping that he can re-sign, because he single-handedly was the point guard for the Clippers, running down the Suns to 6 games in that series. And coming back and beating the Jazz in the second round there. And Reggie Jackson's name on that list is actually something I completely forgot about. People love to sign Danny Green and think that they're going to get an automatic corner shooter like they did when he won 2 championships back to back. But I think that Ben McLemore, right underneath Reggie Jackson, is a big name right there. I'll send you guys the list if you need to look at it again. But there's that. What do you guys think about the remaining after the first day? What are we looking at?
Well, we missed out on one here. We got a couple more pieces of news, and they're kind of big ones. Butler apparently expected to sign a max contract to be in 4 years and above $184 million to stay with the Miami Heat. So that's a massive contract to sign. I think he deserves it. Like, he's been a great player for them. Obviously, they went on that championship run. Was in the bubble, so that was last year, right? Yeah, last year. So, he earns that. Him and Lowry are going to look great together. And then another one that's kind of not being talked about is Steph Curry's probably re-upping for, what was it, Brendan? $220 million over 5 years in
115.
215 over
Yeah.
4 or 5 years.
4.
Over 4 years in Golden State. So that's going to be big for them. I think Golden State's going to look to run it back this year. I think they definitely have potential to do it. They didn't make any trades at the draft, which we thought they would do. They didn't end up doing that, but I still think they have the talent with all the guys coming back. They'll probably be a playoff team. They'll probably win a couple rounds, but if they have that edge to get over and make it to a finals, they got some big teams to compete with in that conference. So we'll see what happens with Golden State, but those are just 2 notes of signings that could possibly happen. What do we think of that?
Waiting for you to answer my question on RFAs, but
Yes.
I got my 2.
thank you, Jarek.
I'm not even copying you. I got Reggie Jackson just because he's a decent playoff performer too. He can help you off the bench. He can help you even a start or 2 here and there.
He really earned himself back into people's trust this past postseason.
100%. And another guy, it might be a little bit surprising, but he's a guy he's pretty consistent from the arc, especially even honestly from very deep too. Is Bryn Forbes. I saw a couple different games against Raptors this year. He's going off, and it's one of those things where if you can have a guy who's not necessarily expected to go off every night, hand you 15 to 20 points every night, I don't know why that would be a bad thing. And especially on this list,
you still like to play with sometimes those players who have the potential to do so.
Exactly, and it's as a Raptors fan too, you always like those players that have the potential, even if they haven't shown it before. And especially in the NBA now with as much parity as there is around the league, I don't think those players are going to hurt you at all. And especially on this list, I feel like there's a lot of veterans, and not a lot of veterans are going to help you necessarily become a contender or even stay a contender. Like you obviously have guys like Lou Will who's going to come off the bench and be a clutch guy, but it's just one of those it's one of those things. Where do you put Lou Williams in the league right now?
Yeah.
Where do you put Andre Iguodala? Where do you put Tony Snell? Where do you put Rudy Gay? Where do you put Otto Porter? Where do you put Danny Green? Like, I don't really feel like there's a lot of room for those guys.
Those guys on those boards, a lot of their situations and the teams that are going to be open to signing them are going to come down to what they think they're worth, right? And it's all about pride and obviously how much these players individually think and their camps think that they are worth. Another player standing out on that list that might be undervalued after what he was for signing with the Lakers a year ago was Wesley Matthews, who initially came from the Milwaukee Bucks, who was honestly, for me, before this past season, really similar in play style to Drew Holiday with the Milwaukee Bucks. We just saw go all the way. And Wesley Matthews was a similar player, and he kind of fell off. He had a really bad season with the Lakers. He's on this list right now, but another automatic shooter. You're hoping that can find comfortability right now. He only really plays shooting in the corners, is not much ball handling, and is JJ Redick, and that's what he's known for. He's one of the top 5 accuracy shooters and accurate shooters in NBA history in terms of shots released and attempted and percentage-wise, but he's just kind of an individual player. And you mentioned Rudy Gay. Rudy Gay has 1 or 2 more years of really good quality basketball left in him, and I think he sneaked out a lot of wins for the San Antonio Spurs that past season where they didn't really have anything to give a care at all in those games. And, I think we've been talking a lot today about people running it back, and a lot of these players, aren't necessarily key pieces of any teams that they were on last year of running it back. So they're hopefully looking to land back in new places, and maybe that'll be the theme of the latter part of the UFA. I think today was the theme was staying home.
Yeah.
And moving forward, maybe you could see more movement. We still have guys like Philadelphia 76ers are attempted to move Ben Simmons, but are still asking astronomical returns.
I think a guy like JJ Redick fits well in LA. Obviously, with the Lakers, obviously.
All of these players look like they fit well in LA, eh?
Yeah, mostly because there's no shooters in LA. I feel like the Lakers, with the trades they made, they not only gave up their best 3-point shooter in KCP, in my opinion, but like you have a guy like Russell Westbrook, who can 100% get you 30, 35 points, maybe 40 points, but he's gonna shoot 9 of 33 from 3, and it's just I feel like you need those more consistent shooters coming off the bench, especially around guys like LeBron and guys like Westbrook.
The thing about that list, and especially in relation to that list and the Warriors, and the Lakers rather, is that it's all aging and getting older and maybe even worn down and risk of injury. And a lot of those players can't go 40 minutes, not even 35. So you still got to find those players that are in the prime of their career. And one sticking out of that name that I haven't even noticed is not maybe prime of his career, but could still run really quality minutes is Patrick Mills, and he's playing for the Australian team in the Olympics, and has always been a quality point guard for Greg Popovich in the San Antonio Spurs. And I think that his style of play and what he's been taught throughout his career is very, very interchangeable, and it can be taken into. You saw the history between Greg Popovich coached players, Kawhi Leonard, and it fit into the Raptors core. It seemed like it was a good flush of attitude. Like they didn't come from the shiny LA or the bright lights of New York. They came from San Antonio, Texas, and they didn't really have to say much type of thing. And they came to the Raptors organization, and they just kind of got to work. And I think that Nick Nurse is going to be a very attractive coach for players even wanting to you always hear about good things about the Raptors development program. And I think that that's around the league, not just because of a recent championship. The guys they won that championship with, they've drafted and got, throughout the whole careers with those guys. But something about is obviously, the age in LA you're talking about with those guys, Derek. However, Josh, I feel like you haven't said anything. Waiting to say something.
No, I've just been listening to you guys talk. Like you sent me this list of free agents still on the board. Like there's some big names on there. Danny Green's a big one to sign. Rudy Gay's obviously a big one. Andre Iguodala, JJ Redick. These are whoever picks these guys up, they're getting a decent basketball player. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next couple days. I think these guys are probably starting to wrap up their signings for the night, and I think we're lucky to kind of catch the action of it. I'm gonna just refresh.
This will be a perfect release for tomorrow morning.
Yeah, it will. I'm just kind of refresh the
just refresh
the thing on Twitter, see if anything else has happened. But for some reason, I clicked on Monday Night Raw, which I don't want to click on. That's our podcast.
Nothing news related there.
No.
Waiting for their new episode.
No, nothing new. So I think we can start to wrap it up.
Well, looking forward to an exciting week of extended free agency and what comes after that.
Well, we got free agency in 2 of our shows right now because the NHL free agency is open, the NBA free agency is open. Adam Cole's going to be a free agent after their NXT 36.
You're going to sign with the Boston Bruins?
Adam Cole's a guy. Anyway.
I know.
He's going to sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
Yeah. So make sure you stay tuned. We'll be back next. We haven't really fully figured out our schedule yet because we were supposed to do this on
the next show. This is where we'll lead off after cutting that last part out, and be looking forward.
Well, no, tomorrow we're gonna do an Orion on ice. We'll move forward from there. So Tuesday we got hockey. Thursday we got wrestling coming back at you. I got some nice messages about that wrestling show. So even if you're not a wrestling fan, tune into it because I think we do it up perfectly. And stay tuned. We'll get on a consistent schedule. We're liking the numbers. We're liking the interaction. Thanks for listening today. And Kyle Lowry's no longer a Raptor.